There are moments in life when everything you thought was solid turns to dust in your hands. For Grace Turner, that moment came at 11:47 on a Tuesday night in Detroit, when her father's voice cut through the living room like a blade she never saw coming. She stood on the porch of the house she'd grown up in, the house on Woodward Avenue where her grandmother had taught her to bake apple pie, where she'd scraped honey learning to ride a bike, where every Christmas morning had smelled like cinnamon and hope. A suitcase sat at her feet. One suitcase. 23 years of life reduced to clothes she could carry in one hand. The door was already closed behind her. Her mother hadn't even looked at her when it happened. Just stood in the kitchen doorway with her arms crossed, silent as a stone, while her father's words landed like fists. Disappointment. Shame. Burden. The kind of words that don't just hurt, they reshape you, carve new shapes into who you thought you were. Grace had tried to explain, tried to make them understand that the medical bills weren't her fault, that the accident had taken everything, that she'd been working doubles at the diner on 8 Mile just to keep her head above water. But debt has a way of drowning families in America, and sometimes the people you love most will throw you overboard to save themselves. Her phone was dead. Her bank account had $17 in it. She had nowhere to go. Asterisk asterisk before we go on. Tell us, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below. Asterisk asterisk. The street was quiet in that particular way Detroit streets get after dark, not peaceful, just empty. Street lights hummed overhead, casting orange pools on cracked sidewalk. A car alarm went off somewhere in the distance. The November wind cut through her jacket like it had a personal grudge. She started walking. Not toward anything. Just away. Away from the shame in her father's eyes, away from her mother's silence, away from the room where she used to feel safe. Her feet carried her down streets she'd known her whole life, past the corner store where she'd bought candy as a kid, past the bus stop where she'd waited every morning for school, past the church where her family pretended to be whole every Sunday. Everything looked different now. Colder. Harder. Like the city itself had turned its back on her too. She walked for an hour. Maybe 2. Time stopped meaning much when you had nowhere to be. Her feet hurt. Her chest hurt worse. The kind of hurt that starts in your ribs and spreads until even breathing feels like work. That's when the car pulled up beside her. Black. Expensive. The kind of vehicle that doesn't belong in this part of Detroit. The kind that makes people look twice and then look away. It rolled alongside her at walking pace, quiet as a predator, and every instinct in her body screamed run. But she was so tired. The window came down. Smooth. Silent. And the man behind the wheel looked at her with eyes that had seen every kind of darkness America had to offer, and owned most of it. He didn't smile. Didn't offer empty comfort. Just spoke 2 words that would change everything. Get in. She should have kept walking. Should have run. Should have done anything except what she did next. She got in. Because sometimes when you're drowning, you don't ask questions about the hand that pulls you up. You just grab on and hope you survive. The interior smelled like leather and something expensive she couldn't name. The kind of clean that comes from money, from people whose lives don't involve scrubbing grease stains or counting coins for bus fare. He didn't speak as he pulled away from the curb. Just drove. Steady. Sure. Like he knew exactly where he was going, even if she didn't. Grace pressed herself against the passenger door and tried to make herself smaller. Tried to think. Tried to figure out what she'd just done. You hurt. His voice was low. Calm. The kind of calm that came from a man who never had to raise his voice because the world bent around him anyway. No. You running from something. She almost laughed. Almost. Everything. He nodded once. Like that made perfect sense. Like he'd heard it before. They drove through downtown, past buildings she recognized. The Renaissance Center lit up like a promise nobody kept. The river reflecting city lights in water that never looked clean. The bridge to Canada where people went to escape and start over. She wondered if that's where he was taking her. Over the border. Into something she couldn't come back from. But he turned east instead. Away from the city center. Into neighborhoods that got quieter, darker, more expensive with every mile. What's your name? He asked. Grace. Grace what? She hesitated. Names meant something. Meant you could be found. Meant you could be traced. But something about the way he asked, not demanding, just asking, made her answer. Turner. Grace Turner. I'm Cole. No last name. Like he didn't need one. You got people looking for you. Grace Turner. No. The word came out harder than she meant it to. I don't have people anymore. He didn't press. Didn't ask for her story. Just drove. They pulled up to a gate. The kind with a keypad and cameras and the weight of real money behind it. It opened without him touching anything, and they drove through into a different world. Not Detroit anymore. Not the city she knew. This was the America they don't show you in the brochures, the one where some people live behind walls and the rest of the world can't even see inside. The house sat at the end of a long driveway. Not a house, really. An estate. 3 stories of stone and glass and the kind of architecture that said old money, even in a city built on cars and unions and working-class grit. It looked like something from a different century, a different country, a different life. He killed the engine. The silence felt heavy. You can leave anytime you want, Cole said, still not looking at her. But if you walk out that gate tonight, you're on your own. If you stay, you're under my protection, which means you follow my rules. You don't ask questions. You don't leave without permission. You don't talk to anyone I don't approve. You stay until I say you're safe. Safe from what? Now he looked at her, really looked at her, and Grace felt something cold slide down her spine. Because his eyes weren't cruel. They were worse. They were knowing. Like he could see every bad decision she'd ever made, every fear she'd never spoken out loud, every secret she thought she'd buried. From whatever's coming next, he said. From the kind of life that throws girls out at midnight and doesn't look back. From men who pull over for women walking alone after dark. From yourself, probably. You're a hurricane looking for somewhere to land. Grace Turner, I'm offering you shelter. But it comes with a cost. What cost? Your freedom. He said it like he was ordering coffee. Simple. Final. While you're here, you belong to me. My house. My rules. My world. You don't leave unless I say. You don't make decisions unless I approve them. You're safe. You're fed. You're protected. But you're mine until I decide you're not. She should have run. Should have opened the door and sprinted back to the gate, back to the streets, back to anything that wasn't this. But the truth was, she had nowhere to go. No money. No family. No friends who could take her in. And the man beside her was offering something she hadn't had in months. Certainty. It was a trap. She knew it was a trap. But sometimes the trap looks better than the cold. Okay, she whispered. He nodded once. Got out of the car. Came around to her side and opened the door like she was something fragile. Something worth careful handling. Welcome home, Cole said. And Grace Turner stepped into a cage made of marble and money and told herself it was just temporary. Just until she got back on her feet. Just until she figured out what came next. She had no idea that some cages don't have locks on the inside. That some prisons are built from comfort instead of bars. That some men don't need chains when they know exactly how to make you want to stay. She followed him into the house, and the door closed behind her with a sound like fate clicking into place. The storm had only just begun. The house swallowed her whole. That first night, a woman appeared, older, stone-faced, with the kind of efficiency that came from years of serving people who expected perfection, and showed Grace to a room on the 2nd floor. Not a bedroom. A suite. Bigger than the apartment Grace had shared with 2 roommates back when she thought she had a future. King-size bed with sheets that probably cost more than her monthly rent used to be. Bathroom with heated floors and a shower that had more settings than her old car. Windows that looked out over ground she couldn't see the end of in the dark. It felt like a hotel. Like someone else's life. Like a dream she'd wake up from broke and desperate. She didn't sleep. Just sat on the edge of that expensive bed and tried to figure out what she'd done. Tried to remember what her life had been 12 hours ago. tried to imagine what it would be tomorrow. Morning came through those big windows like an accusation. Bright, unforgiving, the kind of sunlight that didn't care about your mistakes. The woman from the night before, Mrs. Chen, she said her name was, though Grace had been specifically told not to use that surname, brought breakfast on a tray. Real food, not leftover diner fries or gas station coffee. Actual eggs and toast and orange juice that tasted like it came from real oranges. Grace ate because her body demanded it, but every bite felt like giving in to something she didn't understand yet. Cole didn't appear until afternoon. When he did, he wasn't alone. 2 men flanked him. Quiet, watchful, the kind who didn't need weapons visible to make you understand they were dangerous. They stayed by the door while Cole sat in the chair across from where Grace had been reading a magazine she didn't care about, just to have something to do with her hands. "How'd you sleep?" he asked. "I didn't." "You will. Takes time to adjust." He leaned back, studying her. "We need to establish some things. Ground rules. Boundaries." Grace set the magazine down. "I'm listening." "You don't leave the property. Not until I clear it. There's 20 acres here. You can walk the grounds, use the pool, the library, whatever you want. But the gate stays closed. You understand?" "You said I could leave anytime." "I said you could walk away that first night. You didn't. Now you're here, and here you stay until I know it's safe." "Safe from what?" She heard her voice rise, heard the edge of panic in it. "You keep saying that, but you won't tell me what I'm supposedly in danger from." Cole's expression didn't change. "You got thrown out at midnight by your own family. You were walking the streets alone in Detroit after dark. You got into a car with a stranger because you had nowhere else to go. Those aren't the actions of someone making good choices, Grace. Those are the actions of someone about to get hurt. I'm preventing that. By locking me up. By giving you time to breathe, to think, to not make another decision that gets you killed or worse." He stood. "You've got clothes in the closet. Your size. You need anything else? Tell Mrs. Chen. You want books, music, whatever. Ask. You'll be taken care of. But you don't leave, you don't make phone calls, and you don't talk to anyone I haven't cleared. Those are the rules. And if I break them..." Something flickered in his eyes. Not anger. Something colder. "Don't." He left. The 2 men followed. And Grace sat in that beautiful room in that beautiful house and understood, finally, what she'd traded for a warm bed and a full stomach. Her freedom. Every last piece of it. Asterisk asterisk if this story has already found a place in your heart, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and check the description box below for more stories that stay long after they end at asterisk asterisk. Days blurred together like watercolors in rain. Grace woke up in silk sheets. Ate food she didn't cook. Walked gardens she didn't plant. Read books from a library that must have cost more than most people made in a year. And felt the walls close in a little tighter every single day. Cole appeared and disappeared like weather. Sometimes she'd go 2 days without seeing him. Then he'd show up for dinner, ask how she was doing, make sure she had everything she needed. He never touched her, never threatened, never raised his voice, but his presence filled every room he entered, and even when he was gone, Grace felt watched. Because she was watched. She figured that out by the end of the first week. Cameras, hidden but there. Security that moved through the house like ghosts. Mrs. Chen, who somehow always knew when Grace was hungry, restless, thinking about walking too close to that gate. The cage was beautiful, but it was still a cage. She tried to be angry, tried to hold on to the rage that had kept her moving those first few days. But anger takes energy, and comfort drains it away slowly. The bed was too soft, the food too good, the silence too complete. After months of struggling, of working herself to exhaustion, of never having enough, this place offered her something she'd almost forgotten existed: rest. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. 3 weeks in, she stopped thinking about leaving every hour. Started thinking about it once a day, then every other day. The world outside these walls felt distant, abstract, like something that had happened to someone else. Her family never called. But then, her phone had been disconnected before she even arrived here. No one was looking for her. No one cared where she'd gone. That hurt worse than the confinement. To know that she could disappear completely and not leave a hole anywhere. Cole found her crying one afternoon in the library. She didn't hear him come in, just felt his presence, looked up, and there he was in the doorway, watching her with those dark eyes that saw too much. Grace. She wiped her face roughly. I'm fine. You're not. He came into the room, hands in his pockets, suit jacket perfect even on a Saturday. Talk to me. About what? About how I'm a prisoner in a mansion. About how my own family didn't even ask where I went. About how I don't know if this is better or worse than living in my car, which is probably what would have happened if you hadn't. She stopped. Swallowed. I don't even know what you are. What you do. Why you picked me up that night. Why you're keeping me here. Cole pulled out the chair across from her. Saturday. Looked at her like he was deciding something. What do you think I am? He asked quietly. Dangerous. Good. You should think that. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You want the truth? I'm the kind of man your mother warned you about. The kind they write news articles about but never catch. The kind who moves through Detroit like a shadow and owns more of it than the mayor knows about. I've got people who handle problems for me. People who make sure my business runs smooth. People who don't ask questions when I tell them to do something that would turn your stomach. Grace's hands went cold. Yo. Exactly what you think I am. He didn't blink, didn't soften it. And that night I found you, I was coming back from handling something that needed handling. I was covered in someone else's mistakes. And I saw you walking alone, looking like the whole world had given up on you. And I thought, there's someone about to become another statistic. Another girl who disappears and no one cares enough to look. So you saved me. So I kept you from becoming a problem. His voice was flat, honest in a way that hurt. You don't know how many men drove past you that night. How many saw you and thought about stopping for all the wrong reasons. You were prey, Grace, walking wounded. And this city eats girls like you alive. She couldn't breathe, couldn't process what he was saying. I brought you here because I could, Cole continued. Because I have the power to do it and no one would stop me. Because I saw something in you, some kind of fire that hadn't gone out yet, and I wanted to see what you'd do with it if someone gave you a chance to survive. He stood, looked down at her. You're not a prisoner. You're a project. A question I'm trying to answer. Can someone like you make it in a world like mine? Can that fire burn, or will I have to watch it go out like all the others? I'm not a thing for you to study. No, you're a person who got dealt a garbage hand and kept playing anyway. That's worth something. That's worth protecting, even if the protection looks like a prison from the inside. He left her there, shaking and confused and more afraid than she'd been since that first night. Because now she knew what he was, and knowing made everything worse. Winter came to Detroit the way it always did, sudden and mean, like the city was reminding everyone who was really in charge. Grace watched it from behind glass, watched snow fall on ground she'd walked 100 times, covering everything in white that would turn gray and ugly by morning. Watched the world outside freeze while she stayed warm in a prison made of marble and quiet. Cole was gone more often than not. Business, Mrs. Chen said when Grace asked. Important business, the kind that required late nights and early mornings and phone calls that made his voice drop to that dangerous register Grace had learned to recognize. She didn't ask what kind of business, didn't want to know the specifics, but she heard things, caught pieces of conversations that weren't meant for her ears, names that meant something to people who understood how Detroit's underground worked. She started to understand what he was. Not just dangerous, not just criminal, but necessary, like a dark mirror of the legitimate world, handling the problems no one wanted to admit existed. The violence that kept other violence in check. The fear that prevented chaos. He was the kind of man who made the city run, even if the city would never admit it needed him. And that knowledge changed something in her. Made him less monster, more human. Still terrible, still violent, but purposeful, deliberate. A man who'd chosen his darkness and learned to live in it without apology. She found herself thinking about him when he was gone, wondering where he was, if he was safe, then hating herself for caring. February brought Valentine's Day, a concept that felt absurd in her current situation. But Mrs. Chen appeared that morning with a dress on a hanger, deep red, elegant, the kind of thing Grace hadn't worn since before everything fell apart. "Mr. Grayson requests your presence for dinner tonight," the older woman said. No smile, no explanation, just the statement. Grace took the dress, felt the fabric between her fingers. Expensive, beautiful, wrong. Is this a request or an order? Mrs. Chen's expression didn't change. With Mr. Grayson, there's rarely a difference. Dinner was in the formal dining room, a space Grace had seen but never used. Too big, too grand, made for entertaining people who mattered, not holding captive women who'd run out of options. But that night it was set for two. Candles, wine, food that smelled like it came from restaurants with Michelin stars. Cole stood when she entered. Suit. Perfect. But something different in how he looked at her. Something she couldn't name. "You look," he stopped. Started again. "The dress suits you." "Why am I here?" Grace stayed by the door. Didn't sit. Didn't give in to the scene he'd set. "What is this?" "Dinner." "It's not just dinner. You don't do anything that's just anything." A slight smile. The first real one she'd seen from him. "You're learning." "Good. Yes. It's more than dinner. It's an acknowledgement. You've been here almost 3 months. You haven't tried to run. Haven't caused problems. Haven't done anything stupid that would force my hand. That deserves recognition. You want me to thank you for not escaping my own captivity. I want you to sit down and eat before the food gets cold." Not a request. Never a request with him. She's Saturday. The meal was incredible. Of course it was. Everything in Cole's world was the best version of itself. The best food, the best house, the best cage. They ate in silence for a while, the kind that felt heavy with things neither of them was saying. "Tell me about before," he said finally. "Before that night. Before Detroit ate you alive. Who were you?" Grace set down her fork. "Does it matter?" "Maybe. Maybe I want to know who I'm protecting. Who I'm keeping locked away like some kind of," he paused, "like something precious." The word hung between them. Precious. Like she was a jewel instead of a person. Like being kept in a cage was an honor. But part of her, the part she hated, felt something warm at the word. "I was nobody," she said quietly. "Small-town girl from up north. Came to Detroit for college. Couldn't afford to finish. Worked 3 jobs trying to. Then my roommate got in an accident. Drunk driver. Not her fault. And I was co-signed on the lease, on her medical payment plan, on everything. When she couldn't pay, it fell on me. And I couldn't." Her voice cracked. "I couldn't carry it. Couldn't make the math work. My family told me I was irresponsible. That I'd made bad choices. That I needed to figure it out myself. So I tried. And I failed. And they threw me out. And you picked me up. That's the whole story. Not very interesting." "That's where you're wrong." Cole leaned forward. "You survived. Against everything. That's the most interesting thing in the world. Asterisk asterisk, if you've ever felt torn between fear and love, you'll understand her. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and check the description box below. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Asterisk asterisk. Something shifted that night. Maybe it was the wine. Maybe it was the acknowledgement that 3 months had passed and she was still alive, still here, still Grace Turner even in captivity. Maybe it was the way Cole looked at her across that table, not like property, but like a puzzle he was trying to solve. Like someone who mattered. He started appearing more. Not just checking in. Actually spending time. They'd have coffee in the library. Walk the grounds when the weather cleared. Talk about nothing and everything. He told her about Detroit, about the city's history, about the legitimate businesses he ran alongside the illegitimate ones, about his own past, foster care, streets, fighting his way up from nothing until he'd built an empire made of fear and respect. You could have done anything, Grace said one afternoon. They were in the library, rain against the windows, and she'd finally asked the question that had been burning in her for weeks. You're smart enough. Connected enough. Why this? Why be a criminal? He didn't flinch from the word. Because the legitimate world doesn't make room for people like me. Foster kids from Detroit with records and scars and anger they don't know how to file down into something acceptable. The American dream is for people who start with enough to dream. The rest of us, we build our own version. Less pretty, more honest. You really believe that? I believe the world is run by people who pretend their hands are clean while paying people like me to do the dirty work. At least I don't lie about what I am. She couldn't argue with that. Couldn't defend a system that had chewed her up and spit her out the same way it had done to him. They were different versions of the same story, different reactions to the same betrayal. And that understanding was dangerous, because understanding led to sympathy. Sympathy led to connection. Connection led to feelings she had no business having for the man who held her captive. But feelings don't follow rules. Don't care about logic or self-preservation or the 100 reasons why falling for your captor is textbook wrong. She watched him when he didn't know she was looking. Noticed the way he moved, all control and contained violence. Noticed the rare moments when he smiled, really smiled, and something younger showed through the armor. Noticed the way he'd ask if she slept well, if she needed anything, if she was happy here, like her happiness mattered to him beyond just maintaining his property. Spring arrived. The grounds bloomed. Grace had been in the house for 4 months, and she'd stopped counting days until escape. Started counting something else instead. The number of times Cole touched her hand in passing. The length of time he'd stay when he could have left. The way he looked at her like she was the most interesting thing in his carefully controlled world. The cage was changing. Or maybe she was. Maybe they both were. The first crack in that isolated world came on a Tuesday in April. Grace was in the garden, her garden now, in all the ways that mattered, when Cole appeared moving faster than she'd ever seen him. Not running. Men like him didn't run. But urgent. Focused. Dangerous in a way that made the air around him feel charged. Inside. Now. Not a request. A command that carried weight beyond just words. She didn't argue. Couldn't. The look on his face killed any questions before they formed. They moved through the house quickly, his hand on the small of her back, guiding her toward the room she'd stopped thinking of as a prison and started thinking of as home. Stay here. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone except me or Mrs. Chen. Understand? What's happening? Business. The word was final. Complete. Just stay inside. He was gone before she could respond. And Grace stood in that beautiful room listening to sound she couldn't quite identify. Car doors, voices, movement throughout the house that felt wrong. Coordinated. Like pieces moving on a board she couldn't see. She locked the door, sat on the bed, waited. Hours passed. The sun moved across the floor. Her phone, the one Cole had given her, locked down, only for emergencies, sat silent on the nightstand. She thought about calling him. Didn't. Thought about unlocking the door and finding out what was happening. Didn't do that either. Because she'd learned something in these months. Had learned to trust that Cole's commands came from experience she didn't have. That when he said stay, he meant it. That whatever was happening out there was the kind of thing she didn't want to see. Night fell. Still nothing. Then, finally, a knock. 3 times. The pattern he'd taught her. She opened the door. Cole stood there looking like he'd been through something that aged him. Tie loose. Jacket gone. Something dark on his shirt that might have been blood. Might have been someone else's life painted on expensive fabric. You okay? His voice was rough. Tired. Am I okay? Cole, what? Don't ask. Don't ever ask. He stepped into the room, closed the door behind him, leaned against it like holding himself up took effort. I need you to understand something. The world I live in, it doesn't stop because I want it to. It doesn't care about. He stopped. People know you're here now. No, I'm keeping someone. That makes you a target, a weakness they can exploit. Then let me go. The words came out before she could stop them. If I'm putting you in danger. You're not going anywhere. Fierce. Absolute. You leave this house, you're dead in a week. Maybe less. You don't understand what you'd be walking into. What people would do to get to me. You're safer here. Always safer here. As your prisoner. As someone under my protection. He moved closer. Close enough that she could smell gunpowder and expensive cologne and something copper underneath. Grace, I've killed men for less than looking at what's mine wrong. You think I'd let anyone touch you? You think I'd let the world that broke you have another shot? I'm not yours. Aren't you? He reached up, touched her face. First time. First real touch beyond guiding hands and accidental contact. His fingers were gentle despite everything they'd done. You've been here 5 months. You eat my food, sleep in my house, walk my grounds, wear clothes I bought, live because I decided you would. If that's not mine, what is? She should have pulled away, should have been horrified, should have felt anything except what she did feel, seen, claimed, protected in a way that made every instinct she had war with itself. This is wrong, she whispered. Most real things are. He kissed her, not rough, not taking, just kissed her like he'd been thinking about it for months and finally stopped fighting himself. And Grace, who should have fought, who should have pushed him away, who should have remembered that this man was her captor and this was textbook wrong. She kissed him back, because somewhere in 5 months of captivity, of conversation, of careful proximity, she'd stopped seeing bars and started seeing shelter. Stopped feeling trapped and started feeling safe. Stopped hating him and started not loving. She wouldn't call it that. Couldn't. But something close enough to hurt. When he pulled back, his eyes searched hers, looking for something. Permission, maybe. Or forgiveness for taking what he shouldn't want. This changes things, he said quietly. I know. You can still say no. Can still tell me this crosses a line. I'll back off. Won't touch you again. But I need you to know, I want you. Have since that first night when you got in my car without knowing if I'd kill you or save you. Want you in ways that are probably twisted and definitely wrong and absolutely not something I should admit. But I'm done pretending I don't. Grace felt like she was standing at the edge of something vast and dark. Like the next words out of her mouth would determine everything that came after. She could pull back, draw the line, keep this professional or whatever you called a captivity situation that had somehow become something else. Or she could jump. I don't know what I want, she admitted. I don't know what's real anymore. Don't know if what I feel is genuine or just trauma response, survival instinct, something broken in me that's confusing safety with love. Probably all of that. He was honest, always honest, even when it hurt. Probably you're responding to someone showing you basic human decency after your own family threw you away. Probably I'm taking advantage of a power dynamic that's fundamentally messed up. Probably this whole thing is toxic as hell. But I don't care. Raw, real. I've done terrible things, Grace. Things that would keep you up at night. Things that prove I'm exactly the monster you should be afraid of. But with you, I want to be different. Want to be the man who protects instead of destroys. And if that's selfish, if that's wrong, if I'm damning us both, I still can't make myself care enough to stop. Asterisk, if your heart's racing too, take a breath. And don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and check the description box below for more unforgettable love stories. ***. She didn't answer with words, just reached up and pulled him down to kiss her again. And this time when they fell onto that expensive bed in that beautiful cage, it felt less like captivity and more like choice. Wrong choice, maybe. Complicated choice, definitely. But hers. For the first time in 5 months. Entirely hers. Outside, Detroit moved through its darkness. Inside, 2 broken people found something like comfort in each other's damage. And if it was twisted, if it was wrong, if every therapist in America would have a field day analyzing it. For one night, they pretended it didn't matter. The weeks after that night were different. Not better, not worse, just different. Like someone had rewritten the rules but forgotten to tell Grace what the new ones were. Cole still left for his business. Still came back late with that look in his eyes that said he'd done things she didn't want to imagine. But now when he returned, he'd find her, sit with her, touch her like she was real instead of just another asset to protect. They didn't talk about what they were, didn't label it. Labels required honesty neither of them was ready for. Instead, they existed in this strange space between captive and partner, between protection and possession, between what was right and what felt necessary. Grace told herself it was temporary, that she was adapting to survive, that when the opportunity came, she'd leave. But the lie got thinner every day, and eventually she stopped telling it altogether. June brought heat that made Detroit shimmer like a mirage, made the house feel smaller despite its size, made everything feel close to breaking. That's when her past called. Grace was in the library when Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway, holding a phone. Not the lockdown device Cole had given her. A different one. "Someone's been trying to reach you," the older woman said carefully, "through channels that required effort to find. Mr. Grayson thinks you should know." "Who?" "Your mother." The word hit like a fist. Grace felt her chest tighten, felt the air go thin. 6 months. 6 months of silence, and now, what does she want? "Mr. Grayson is handling it, but he thought you should decide whether to speak with her." Cole appeared behind Mrs. Chen, reading Grace's face, understanding without being told what this meant. "You don't have to," he said. "I can make it go away. Make sure she never finds you again. You want that? Say the word." Grace's hands were shaking. How did she even? "Your old employer filed paperwork. Unemployment claim listed this address. Someone who cared enough to dig found it. Your mother hired a private investigator. Decent one, too. Took him 2 months. She's looking for me. She's looking for something. Whether it's actually you or just closure or guilt, that's harder to say." Cole moved into the room, stood close but didn't touch, gave her space to decide. What do you want? What did she want? Grace didn't know. Didn't know if she wanted to hear her mother's voice after 6 months of nothing. Didn't know if she wanted explanations or apologies or just the satisfaction of hanging up. Didn't know anything except that this moment felt like standing at a crossroads with no map. "I'll talk to her," she said finally. "But here, where you can hear, where I'm." She stopped. Almost said safe. Almost admitted that the cage had become the only place she felt secure. "Where I'm not alone." Cole nodded, made a gesture. Mrs. Chen handed over the phone and left, closing the door behind her. The phone felt heavy, dangerous, like holding something that could explode. Cole sat in the chair across from her, close enough to help if needed, far enough to let her handle it herself. Grace dialed. Her mother answered on the second ring. "Hello." That voice. Grace hadn't realized how much she'd missed it until she heard it. How much she'd wanted to hear worry, relief, love. But there was only tension. Uncertainty. The voice of someone calling because they had to, not because they wanted to. "Mom. It's me." Silence. Then, "Grace." "Oh God. Grace, where have you been?" "We've been worried sick." "No, you haven't." The words came out flat. "Had. You threw me out 6 months ago. Didn't call. Didn't check. Didn't care where I ended up. You don't get to be worried now. That's not fair. You don't understand what you put us through. The shame. The debt collectors calling. The neighbors asking questions. We had to protect yourselves. You had to protect yourselves. I know. I was there when you chose the house over your daughter. More silence. Then her mother's voice, smaller. Where are you? Are you safe? The investigator said you're living in Birmingham with someone named. The name was redacted. Grace, who is he? What are you doing? I'm surviving. Which is more than you cared about when you pushed me out that door. We didn't know what else to do. The debt was crushing us. Your father's business was barely. She stopped. We thought you'd figure it out. You were always so capable. So strong. We thought. You thought I'd handle it because it was easier than helping me. Grace felt tears coming. Hated them. Hated that after everything, this still hurt. You know what I've learned? Family is supposed to be the people who catch you when you fall. But sometimes family is just the people who push you because it's convenient. Grace, please. We want to help now. We can. You can't do anything. You can't fix this. You can't undo 6 months of not caring whether I was alive or dead. You can't. Her voice broke. You can't be my mother now. You gave up that right. Cole moved. Quiet. Careful. Sat beside her on the couch and took her free hand. Didn't speak. Just held on. Is he there? Her mother asked, voice sharp with something like fear. Whoever you're with. Grace, are you in trouble? Are you safe? Do we need to call? I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And saying it out loud made it real. Made it true in a way she'd been avoiding for months. I'm with someone who protects me. Who feeds me. Who keeps me safe when the world wants to break me. Someone who didn't throw me away the second I became inconvenient. Grace. Don't call again. Don't look for me. Don't pretend you care now that it's too late. I'm alive. I'm fine. That's all you need to know. That's all you deserve to know. She hung up, dropped the phone like it burned. And then the tears came, hot and angry and full of grief for something she couldn't get back. Cole pulled her against his chest. Let her cry. Didn't offer empty comfort or tell her it would be okay. Just held her while she broke down. While 6 months of pretending she was fine shattered like glass. I hate them, she sobbed into his shirt. I hate that I wanted her to care. That I wanted her to apologize. That part of me still needs. She couldn't finish. You're allowed to hate them, Cole said quietly. You're allowed to need them even though they failed you. That's not weak. That's human. I sound like a child. You sound like someone whose family broke them. That doesn't have an age limit. She cried until she couldn't anymore. Until her eyes burned and her throat ached and she felt hollowed out. Empty in a way that was almost relief. Like purging poison. When she finally pulled back, Cole's shirt was ruined. She almost apologized. Stopped herself. Because he didn't care. Was looking at her like she was something precious instead of something broken. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For being here. For, she gestured vaguely at everything. The house. The protection. Him. For not being them. Something shifted in his expression. Something that looked almost like pain. Grace, you should know. Me keeping you here, it's not entirely noble. I'm not some hero rescuing you. I'm a man who wanted something and took it. You being here benefits me as much as it protects you. I know what you are. Do you? Do you really understand what it means that I won't let you leave? That I've convinced myself this is protection when it's really just… He stopped. When it's really just me being selfish enough to keep something good in a life that's mostly darkness. She touched his face. Made him look at her. You think I don't know this is complicated? That I haven't spent 6 months trying to figure out if what I feel is real or just survival. I know exactly what this is. What we are. And I'm still here. Still choosing to stay. That has to count for something. It counts for everything, he admitted. And that terrifies me. Because men like Cole didn't get terrified, didn't let themselves feel vulnerable, didn't admit that someone, had gotten under their skin enough to matter. But Grace had. Somehow, impossibly, she'd become the thing he couldn't afford to lose. And that knowledge was about to make everything more dangerous. The threat came 3 days after Grace's mother called. Cole knew it was coming before it arrived. Had known since the moment that private investigator found Grace's location. Because information like that didn't stay contained. Didn't stay between mother and daughter. It leaked, spread, found its way to people who understood that Cole having something he cared about meant having leverage. And in his world, leverage meant blood. He increased security, added men to the rotation, stopped leaving Grace alone even for an hour. She noticed but didn't ask. Had learned to read him well enough by now to know when asking would just make him pull away. They were in the library when his phone rang with the ringtone he'd set for emergencies. Cole answered without greeting. Talk. Grace watched his face change. Watched the man she'd been getting to know disappear behind walls of cold calculation. When he hung up, she already knew something was wrong. How bad? She asked. He looked at her for a long moment. Like memorizing. Like preparing for something. Bad enough that I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to say. Can you do that? She nodded. There's a crew out of Chicago. Rivals who've been pushing into Detroit for months. They know about you. Know you're here. Know that He stopped. They know you matter. And they are planning to use that. To take you. Use you against me. Grace felt cold spread through her chest. When? Soon. Maybe tonight. Maybe tomorrow. They are waiting for the right moment. But it's coming. He moved to her. Took both her hands. I can protect you. Will protect you. But you need to trust me completely. Do exactly what I say when I say it. No questions. No hesitation. Can you do that? Yes. If something happens. If we get separated. If things go wrong. His jaw worked. There's a panic room. 3rd floor. Behind the bookshelf in the east bedroom. Mrs. Chen knows. You get there. You lock it. You don't come out until I come for you. You understand? Cole! You don't come out. Not for anything. Not if you hear fighting. Not if you hear me. Not if someone says I sent them. You stay locked in that room until I personally come get you. Promise me. She'd never seen him scared before. Angry, yes. Dangerous, constantly. But not scared. Not like this. Like he was looking at something he couldn't control and it was tearing him apart. I promise, she whispered. He pulled her into his arms. Held her tight enough to hurt. I won't let them take you. Won't let them touch you. I'll burn Chicago to the ground before I let anyone hurt what's mine. I'm scared. Good. Fear keeps you careful. Keeps you alive. They stayed like that until his phone rang again. More updates. More movements in a chess game Grace couldn't see but could feel closing in. That night, Cole didn't sleep. Just sat by the window in her room, watching the grounds, hand never far from the weapon she'd pretended not to notice he was carrying. Grace lay in bed pretending to rest, but every sound made her flinch. Every shadow looked like a threat. Dawn came. Nothing happened. Another day passed. Still nothing. But the tension built. Cole's men moved through the house like soldiers expecting war. Mrs. Chen packed bags, prepared for evacuation if needed. Grace felt like a storm was coming and she was standing in the open with nowhere to hide. The attack came at 2 a.m. on a Saturday. Grace woke to sound. Not loud. Just wrong. Movement that shouldn't be there. She reached for Cole but found empty space. He was already moving, already dressed, already transformed into something lethal. Go, he said. One word. Final. She ran. Down the hallway. Up the stairs. East bedroom. Bookshelf. The mechanism Cole had shown her worked smoothly. The panic room opened. Small. Reinforced. Stocked with supplies like he'd been preparing for this. She locked herself inside and heard the world explode. Gunfire. Not like movies. Sharper. More real. Each shot a thunderclap that made her jump. Shouting. Things breaking. The sounds of violence in a house that had been her sanctuary. Grace pressed herself into the corner and prayed to a God she wasn't sure she believed in anymore. Prayed that Cole was okay. That his men would hold. That she'd survive whatever came next. *** before we close this chapter, take a moment, like, comment, subscribe, and check the description box below. Every small gesture helps the next story find its way to you. ***. Time stopped meaning anything. Could have been minutes. Could have been hours. The sounds changed. Grew quieter. Then stopped altogether. Silence was worse than noise. Because silence meant it was over. Someone had won. And Grace didn't know which side. She waited. Like Cole told her to. Even when she heard footsteps outside the room. Even when someone tried the door. Even when a voice she didn't recognize said Cole sent them. Come out. It's over. You're safe now. She stayed silent. Stayed hidden. Trusted the man who'd kept her safe for 7 months even if he wasn't here to prove she should. Then another voice. Closer. Quieter. Grace. It's me. It's over. Open the door. Cole. Definitely Cole. But she'd been told not to trust even that. Not to come out until. I know what you're thinking, he continued through the steel door. I know I told you not to trust anyone. Not even me. But I need you to listen. You remember that first night? When I picked you up, you were wearing a blue jacket. Too thin for November. And you said your name was Grace Turner. Not just Grace. Full name. Like you were holding onto it because it was all you had left. Remember? She did. She remembered everything about that night. And you asked me why I stopped. Why I didn't just keep driving. And I didn't answer because I didn't know. But I know now. I stopped because I saw someone who reminded me of myself. Someone the world threw away who kept walking anyway. Someone worth saving even if saving them meant locking them up. Grace moved to the door. Put her hand against the cold metal. Is it really over? Yeah, it's really over. They're gone. My men are cleaning up. You're safe. But I need you to come out because I need to see you. Need to know you're okay. Please. She opened the door. Cole stood there looking like he'd been through hell. Blood on his clothes. Not his, she could tell. Bruises forming on his face. But alive. Whole. Looking at her like she was the only thing that mattered. They didn't speak. Just held each other in a hallway full of damage while Detroit got ready for another sunrise neither of them thought they'd see. How many? Grace asked finally. Enough. His voice was rough. Enough that Chicago will think twice before coming back. Enough that everyone knows you're protected. That touching you means death. Did you? Don't ask. You don't want those details in your head. But she could imagine. Could see it in the way he held himself. In the darkness behind his eyes. Cole had done terrible things tonight. Things that would haunt anyone else. And he'd done them for her. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me. This is my fault. If I'd let you go like I should have, you wouldn't have been in danger. But I couldn't. His voice broke. Actually broke. I couldn't let you leave. Can't let you leave. Even knowing what keeping you here costs. I'm that selfish. That twisted. That far gone. Grace pulled back to look at him. Really look at him. So the man behind the monster. The person who'd chosen darkness to survive but still had pieces of light left. The one who'd built a cage around her but somehow made it feel like home. I don't want to leave, she said. And meant it. Recovery took time. The house was repaired within days. Cole had people for that. People who asked no questions and left no trace. But the psychological damage took longer. Grace couldn't sleep without waking in panic. Couldn't hear unexpected sounds without flinching. The sanctuary had been invaded, and knowing it could happen again poisoned everything. Cole felt it too. She could tell. He was different after that night. More protective. More possessive. Like he was trying to build walls thick enough to keep the world out permanently. More men on security. New systems. New protocols. The house became a fortress, beautiful but sealed. And Grace was still inside. But things had shifted. The attack had forced both of them to admit what they'd been dancing around for months. That this wasn't temporary. That whatever had started as captivity had become something neither of them knew how to name, but both understood was permanent. They didn't talk about it directly, just adjusted to the new reality. Cole spent more nights in her room. Not always intimate. Sometimes just there. Present. Like he needed to be close to verify she was real and safe. Grace stopped asking about leaving. Stopped planning escape routes in her head. Stopped pretending this was anything except what it was. A choice. Twisted and complicated and probably unhealthy. But a choice she was making with eyes open. August came. 8 months since that night in Detroit. Grace had been in the house longer than she'd been homeless. Longer than she'd struggled. It was becoming her baseline. Her normal. The before times felt distant now. Abstract. Like something that had happened to someone else. They were having breakfast when Cole set down his coffee and looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. "I need to tell you something," he said. Grace felt her stomach drop. "Okay." The Chicago crew. They are done. Scattered. Won't be a problem again. And I've handled the other threats. Made it clear across every network that matters that you're protected. That coming after you means war. He paused. Which means you're safe now. Actually safe. Not just locked away safe. You could leave. Go anywhere. Start over. I'd make sure you had money. New identity if you wanted. Protection until you're established. You could have a real life. A normal life. Grace set down her fork carefully. What are you saying? I'm saying the door's open. Has been for a while, but now it's really open. You can walk out. I won't stop you. Won't follow you. Won't interfere. You want freedom. It's yours. You've earned it. She stared at him, trying to understand. You want me to leave? No. Raw. Honest. God, no. I want you to stay. Want to keep you here forever where I know you're safe in mine and, he stopped. But that's selfish. That's me being the monster everyone thinks I am. You deserve choice. Real choice. Not coerced. Not survival-based. Actual decision-making power over your own life. And if I choose to stay... Cole looked at her like she'd offered him something impossible. Then you stay. But I need you to understand what that means. It means accepting this life. This world. What I do. Who I am. It means being with someone dangerous. Someone violent. Someone who's made enemies and will make more. It means luxury and protection, but also risk. It means being loved by someone who doesn't love like normal people. Who'll be possessive and controlling and probably unhealthy in ways you deserve better than. You're trying to talk me out of staying. I'm trying to give you information to make a real choice. Because if you stay, Grace, if you choose this, choose me, I need to know it's because you want to. Not because you're afraid to leave. Not because you've got nowhere else to go. But because this is what you actually want. Grace stood, walked to the window, looked out at grounds she'd walked 1,000 times, at a view that had become familiar, at a prison that had somehow become home. You know what's funny? She said quietly. My whole life, I was told I wasn't enough. Wasn't smart enough to finish college without debt. Wasn't strong enough to handle my problems. Wasn't valuable enough to help when things got hard. My own family looked at me and decided I was disposable. She turned to face him. But you? You looked at me at my absolute lowest and decided I was worth protecting. Worth keeping. Worth building walls around and defending against the world. You saw value when no one else did. That doesn't mean you owe me anything. I know. That's not what this is. She moved closer. I've had 8 months to think about this. To figure out what I want. And here's the truth. I don't want normal. Normal threw me away. Normal let me fall. Normal is the world that breaks people like us and tells us it's our fault. You're offering me something different. Complicated, yes. Probably toxic by conventional standards, yes. But real, honest. You've never lied to me about what you are. Never pretended this was something it wasn't. And there's freedom in that. In being with someone who sees your damage and doesn't flinch. So you're staying. I'm choosing to stay. There's a difference. She took his hands. I could leave. Could start over somewhere. Build a conventional life with conventional problems and conventional happiness. But I don't want that. I want this. Want you. Want a life that's mine even if it's unconventional. Want to be with someone who'd bind cities for me instead of someone who'd throw me out to save themselves. Cole pulled her close, rested his forehead against hers. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything. Then stay. Stay and let me love you the only way I know how. Stay and build something with me. Stay and be mine the way I've been yours since that first night. She kissed him. Soft. Sure. A promise and a choice and a future she was claiming. When they broke apart, Grace felt lighter than she had in months. Like she'd been carrying a decision and finally set it down. Like she'd been standing at a crossroads and finally chosen a direction. For the record, she said, I think we're both a little broken. A little twisted. A little too damaged for this to be healthy by any textbook definition. Probably. But maybe that's okay. Maybe broken people find each other because we understand things others don't. That safety isn't always conventional. That love doesn't always look pretty. That sometimes the cage is the kindest thing someone can offer. Is that what this is? Cole asked. Love. Grace thought about it. About 8 months of captivity that became companionship. About fear that became trust. About a man who'd kept her locked away but never let her feel alone. About choosing him every day even when she didn't have to. Yeah, she said finally. I think it is. Complicated and strange and probably not what anyone would choose. But love anyway. The kind that survives. The kind that chooses. The kind that finds you at your worst and stays. Cole kissed her again. Deeper this time. Like sealing something. Like making promises neither of them could afford to break. Outside, Detroit moved through another day. Inside, 2 people who'd been broken by the world found something like wholeness in each other's damage. And if it wasn't conventional, if it wouldn't make sense to anyone else, if therapists would have concerns and friends would have questions, it was theirs. And that was enough. A year passed. Then another. Grace stopped counting time in terms of before and after. Stopped measuring her life against what it could have been and started living what it was. The house remained her home. Cole remained her, well, they still didn't have a good word for it. Partner sounded too casual. Lover too shallow. Captor too dark for what they'd become. So they didn't label it. Just lived it. She helped with his legitimate businesses. Found out she had a head for numbers. Foreseeing patterns others missed. Cole started bringing her into planning meetings. Not the violent side. He still kept that separate. Still protected her from the worst of what he did. But the business side. The strategy. She became valuable beyond just being protected. Became a partner in ways that mattered. Her family tried to reach out twice more. Grace declined both times. Some wounds didn't heal. Some betrayals didn't deserve forgiveness. She'd built a new life, and they had no place in it. That hurt sometimes. But it hurt less than pretending they cared when they hadn't. Detroit changed around them. Gentrification pushed further into neighborhoods that had been forgotten. New money came in. Old power shifted. Cole adapted. Expanded. Built an empire that looked legitimate from the outside while keeping the foundation that made it strong. He was still dangerous. Still violent when necessary. But careful. Controlled. The kind of power that lasted because it knew when to hide. And through it all, Grace stayed. Not because she had to. Not anymore. She had money now. Cole made sure of it. Had her own accounts. Her own credit cards. Her own resources. Could leave anytime. could start over, could build a conventional life if she wanted. She didn't want. They had good days and hard days. Days when the weight of what Cole did in the dark pressed heavy. Days when Grace wondered if she'd made the right choice. Days when they fought, not gently, not quietly, but with the kind of honesty that came from two people who'd seen each other's worst and stayed anyway. Days when she remembered her old life and felt ghost pains for what she'd lost. But more days when she woke up next to someone who'd die before letting anyone hurt her. Days when she worked on problems that mattered and felt competent and valued. Days when she walked grounds that felt like hers and looked at a future that felt solid. Days when she understood that freedom wasn't about where you were but who you chose to be. If stories like this linger in your heart long after they end, don't leave just yet. Like, comment, subscribe, and check the description box below, and let the next story find you when the night grows quiet again. Grace was in the library 3 years after that first night when Cole found her. She was reading, actually reading, not just passing time. Content in a way she'd never expected to be. He sat across from her, waited until she set the book down. "What?" she asked, smiling. "Nothing. Just looking at you, thinking about how different things are from that night. Better different or worse different. Different. You're not the same person who got in my car. Neither am I. Probably." Grace considered that. "No, I'm not." That Grace was desperate and lost and would have done anything to survive. This Grace, she paused. This Grace is here because she wants to be. That's the difference. Choice instead of circumstance. Any regrets? She thought about it honestly. About the life she could have had. The normal relationships. The conventional happiness. The safety of being like everyone else. "No," she said finally. "No regrets. This isn't what I would have chosen if you'd asked me 3 years ago. But 3 years ago I was a different person living a different life. This Grace, your Grace, she wouldn't change anything." "My Grace." He tested the words. "Is that what you are?" "Yeah, I think so. Yours the way you're mine. Complicated and strange and probably unhealthy by every standard that matters. But real. Solid. The kind of thing that survives because it's chosen every day instead of just accepted." Cole crossed to her, pulled her up, held her like she was still that fragile thing from 3 years ago instead of the woman she'd become. "I love you. Should have said it earlier. Should say it more. But I do. Love you in ways that probably don't look like love from the outside but feel like everything from in here." "I know. I've known for a while." Grace kissed him softly. "I love you too. The you that most people never see. The one who's capable of terrible things but chooses to be careful with me. The one who built a cage that became a home. The one who gave me choice when he could have just kept me prisoner." They stayed like that while afternoon light moved across the floor. Two people who'd found each other in darkness and built something that survived the light. Years would pass after that. They'd face more threats. There were always threats in Cole's world. More violence. More danger. More moments when Grace wondered if she'd survive what came next. But they would survive. Together. Because that's what they'd built. Not safety. Not conventional happiness. But partnership. The kind that endured because it was forged in fire instead of comfort. Grace never went back to her old life. Never tried to reconnect with family who'd thrown her away. Never looked back at the person she'd been before that night and wished for different choices. Because the truth was, that night had broken her. But it had also rebuilt her into something stronger. Something that understood that survival wasn't just about staying alive. It was about finding reasons to keep living. And she'd found hers. In a man who'd kept her captive and set her free in the same breath. In a house that had been a prison and became a sanctuary. In a life that looked wrong from the outside but felt right from within. Sometimes at night, she'd stand at the window and look out at Detroit. At the city that had broken her. At the streets where she'd walked alone and desperate. At the life she'd left behind. And she'd feel grateful. Not for the pain. Not for the betrayal. But for the path it had carved. the one that led her here, to this man, this life, this strange, complicated, beautiful thing they'd built from ashes and damage. The world would never understand them, would never approve, would see captivity where they saw choice, would see Stockholm Syndrome where they saw love, would see a victim where Grace saw a survivor who'd claimed her own future. And that was okay, because they didn't need the world's approval, didn't need validation from people who'd never walked their roads, didn't need understanding from those who'd never had to choose between drowning and accepting an unusual lifeline. They had each other, had survived, had built something real in a world that specialized in breaking people like them. And in the end, that was enough. Grace Turner had been thrown away at midnight by people who should have loved her, had been picked up by a dangerous man who'd said two simple words that changed everything. Get in. She'd gotten in, and somehow, impossibly, found her way home. Not to a place, not to a life she'd planned, but to a person, to Cole, to herself, to a version of freedom that looked like captivity but felt like choice. The storm had passed, the quiet had come, and in that quiet, Grace had found peace. The kind you can't plan for, the kind you can't force, the kind that finds you when you stop running and start accepting that sometimes the path to healing doesn't look like anyone said it would. She'd been broken. She'd survived. She'd chosen. And that choice, that beautiful, complicated, strange choice, had made all the difference.